Okay, greetings and welcome to another Grenfell MediaWatch update. Today's edition is called Deeper into the Long Grass. And for those of you who are quite astute, that's a reference to the fact that politicians are kicking the issue of Grenfell further and further back. We're not hearing much about it in the media, other than on anniversaries or when the community actually pushes back hard to raise awareness. And the situation, what's happening in Grenfell, is still very real. Tower block fires are still in clear and present danger. Now, there was a fire in Markland House on the 13th floor, and it was an incident that re-traumatised Grenfell survivors who were nearby, those living in the tower block who were actually petrified of what could happen. Now, thankfully, there were no injuries. Many people are saying that was because there was no cladding on that particular tower. But it was a really strong reminder that actually this is still a live issue. I mean, some of the stories that don't get a lot of media attention is things like 100 residents in West Yorkshire were given basically 3 hours to evacuate their dwellings, when the West Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Authority said that, look, this is a fire risk flat. Where you're staying, if you was asleep and there's a fire, you'd probably die. I mean, up and down the country, house owners are still waiting 2 years after Grenfell to have safety checks on their premises to make sure that the places that they're living in are safe. There's some 17,000 flats covered in cladding 2 years after the event. 2 years. Someone's not taking this seriously enough. Now, tower block owners who recognise they have to comply with these safety rules are actually now complaining that the costs are going to run into the billions. Now, the government needs to sort out what should be mandatory obligations and ensure that those costs are not shifted onto renters, because of course that would be completely against the spirit of social justice. Now, talking about justice, we have heard in the media about the frauds of Daniel Steffenton, who's actually claimed, or he's admitted, fraudulently claiming £75,000, which was meant for Grenfell victims and survivors. Now, we've heard a lot about that, but again, we're not hearing anything about justice for those who are responsible for these safety violations that murdered people in their sleep. Now, interesting enough, Councillor Pat Mason is actually leading demands that former Prime Ministers are made to give testimony to the inquiry. He's saying that actually, ever since Lakenham House, which happened in 2009, that's 8 years before Grenfell, they have been asleep on the job. And I agree with him. And there should be a space for us to say, actually, what have they done? And are they culpable? These things happened under their watch. Now, the inquiry has responded, and it says it will respond in due course. That is its response. So I guess that's a no then. Anyway, in the meanwhile, Paul Bissetti, this is the racist who was responsible for producing or sharing the video of the Grenfell effigy on bonfire night. He's been cleared of any offence. And this is a really, really interesting case, because his argument somehow that the figurines inside the cardboard effigy with the word Grenfell Tower were not of the people who were lost, whose lives were lost that night, but those people in the windows were actually him and his friends. He feels that we misunderstood that, and clearly the justice system believes him because they've cleared him. Anyway, this edition is called Deeper into the Long Grass, and that's also a reference to the fact that 2 years later on, people in the community, in the Grenfell community, survivors, victims, are saying that they still haven't received adequate mental health services. Now, at the last update, I spoke about the tragic suicide of Amanda Beckles.
Okay, I see you have noticed.
I could have also spoke about Tim Burke, who last August took his own life. So what we're also learning is that people have been diagnosed with PTSD and other conditions are being discharged. People are saying that there's not a sufficient safety net for some of the people suffering with mental health issues to deal with Grenfell. And that the NHS in particular needs to innovate. They need to think differently. They need to provide a more holistic service. And I suspect they're saying that healing shouldn't be cost-driven. Anyway, this is unfortunately an ongoing issue, and I'm really hoping we're not hearing of any more suicides, because we are hearing much about increased rates of depression, especially after the fire. that I spoke about at the top of this update. Anyway, despite the lack of support from government, it's wonderful to hear that people all over the UK are still offering support to the Grenfell families, to the community, survivors. It's amazing. At Notting Hill Carnival, thousands stopped for 72 seconds on both days, actually, in remembrance. In fact, it's quite funny because there's a few people who decided not to stop, and they were arguing that Carnival shouldn't have politics involved in it. They totally don't understand that the roots of Carnival comes through politics. It came from the murder of Kelso Cochrane, from the race riots in 1958. That's what led to it. That's what led to this unity, where people came together in solidarity to say not in our name and to celebrate African Caribbean culture. So remembering Grenfell in this way was beautiful. Also, that wonderful charity, Cornwall Hugs Grenfell, they've actually erected the symbol of Grenfell, the green heart, on a Grenfell street in their area, again as another expression of solidarity. Now, they have hosted some 480 people in Cornwall as therapists treating. This is a kind of innovative approach to mental health that I'm talking about, that many people are talking about. We have to think differently. Last week also saw the launch of the 50/50 campaign to raise some £30,000 for the Justice for Grenfell campaign, and they're doing some amazing work in support of the community, but it costs. If you think about their amazing billboard campaign and all the other things that they do, buying a t-shirt in support of this wonderful organisation, this wonderful movement, is the least we can do to support them. Please help contribute. Phase 2 of the public inquiry hearings are scheduled to start in January 2020. That's still a way to go. I'm not saying they haven't got a lot of work to do, but we've got to be vigilant. There are forces trying to kick us into the long grass, trying to get to a situation where people forget. New projects, new campaigns. But this affects everyone, even if you don't live in a tower block. This is about dignity. This is about justice. So I'm going to close as always and say, may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us on this beautiful autumn summer day. I know it's a contradiction in terms. Ashe.